Dana White just proved the UFC is rigged. And I'm not talking about fixed fights, I'm talking about something way worse in my opinion, fixed matchmaking. During the halftime of an NFL game, Dana White casually announced UFC 324 and UFC 325, two massive cards, back-to-back events, and buried in those announcements, two title fights that mathematically prove the UFC doesn't care about rankings anymore. Arman Tsarukyan, the real #1 contender, just got erased from the lightweight title picture until 2026. Meanwhile, Paddy Pimblett, who's never beaten a top 5 opponent in his life, is one win away from fighting for the belt. And it gets worse because they also announced a rematch nobody asked for, while the actual #1 contender sits at home undefeated. This isn't MMA anymore. This is WWE with real punches, and I'm about to show you exactly how the UFC is rigging the game right in front of your eyes.
You just saw Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the interim title. Earlier, Topuria posted, "I'm dealing with some personal problems, so I'm not gonna fight the first quarter." So
posting on X that it will be several months before he steps into the octagon again. "I won't be fighting in the first quarter of next year. I'm going through a difficult moment in my personal life. I want to focus on my children and resolve the situation as soon as possible. I don't want to hold up a division. The UFC will make the matchups needed, and as soon as the matters are resolved, I'll let the UFC know I'm ready to begin my return."
The winner of Gaethje versus Paddy will be the interim title, and then they will face Topuria.
He announces UFC 324 in Las Vegas, then UFC 325 in Sydney, both part of the new Paramount partnership, both stacked with absolute bangers on paper. These cards look incredible, okay? That's not a doubt. The UFC wants you focused on how loaded they are. They want you talking about Nunes versus Harrison, even though in my opinion that should be a main event on its own. They want you hyped about O'Malley versus Song Yadong, but they don't want you talking about the main events, because the main events expose the entire system. The UFC is using a classic misdirection play here. Stack the undercard with legitimate matchmaking so nobody questions the championship fights. It's the same strategy as WWE. That's what they use. They put great matches on the card to distract from the terrible main event storyline.
Interim title fight, by the way, that does not feature a #1 contender, because the #1 contender at 155 pounds is a guy named Arman Tsarukyan, and he's not involved in this fight. And of course, the champion Ilia Topuria is not involved in this fight. This is a makeshift fight. This is as prestigious as a BMF title. God bless. I said I wanted to see Paddy fight for the belt. God bless. I said, Justin, I think you need to win a couple more. He said he was going to retire. Unless he got a title fight, I guess he's not retiring. He's fighting for an interim title. But this is a bogus fight, and it's insane to me that it is headlining over Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. On paper, Paddy versus Justin, if Paddy wasn't fighting Ilia, and Ilya's supposed to fight Arman, on paper, Paddy versus Justin is a fine fight to determine the #1 contender to fight Ilia and or Arman. Ilia won that belt back in June. I don't even think you need an interim title fight. Honestly, it should have been the co-main event, 5-round, #1 contender fight, Ilia versus Arman, second half of the year. What's the problem with that? And now what you just said, because he reiterated this in the Instagram Live, the winner of this fight is going to fight Ilia. What happens to Arman? Arman's going to have to fight who? What is going on? What does Arman Tsarukyan have to do to get a shot at the belt?
And it works. UFC 324 is stacked, like I said. Let's give it credit where it's due. Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Derek Lewis, fun opener. Two guys trying to knock each other into another dimension. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Davison Figueiredo, very good fight right there. Technical chess match. Youth versus veteran. Everyone wants this fight. Arnold Allen versus Sean Silva, elite matchmaking. Beautiful scrap on paper. Harrison versus Amanda Nunes, the GOAT versus two-time Olympic gold medalist. Massive co-main event right there. Up until this point, the UFC was cooking. Every fight makes sense, every matchup is justified, the card looks like a legitimate sport, but then you get to the main event, Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the interim lightweight title, and that's where everything falls apart, because this isn't a sport decision, this is a business decision disguised as a sport decision, and the UFC is hoping you're too distracted by the rest of the card to notice. Here's why this is a problem though. An interim title is supposed to be for the number 1 and number 2 contenders. That's how it's always been, that's how it was sold to us, okay? When the champion can defend, it's supposed to determine who the next in line is based on merit. But Paddy Pimblett isn't number 2. He's not number 2 in the rankings. And that ranking itself is generous based on actual wins. So how did we get here?
And 2026 is going to be the biggest year of my life. I am coming for that interim title. Then I'll be making it the undisputed title when I come and beat Ilia Topuria up and take the undisputed title. And then little posh boy, if he manages to fight in that time, because he likes sitting out and saying he's got a sore back, if little posh boy fights in that time and keeps his ranking, I'll punch his head in as well.
Let's talk about Paddy Pimblett's resume real quick, because this is where the math stops adding up. He beat Jared Gordon, controversial split decision. Most media members scored it for Gordon. Most fans thought Gordon won. Even Joe Rogan questioned it live on commentary. He beat Tony Ferguson. Tony was 40 years old and on a 6-fight losing streak. Tony's a legend, but beating him 2024 doesn't prove you're elite. He also beat Bobby Green. Bobby was 37 years old and coming off multiple losses as well. Another name value win against a declining veteran. He beat Michael Chandler. Now, this is Paddy's best win. Chandler is exciting. Chandler is tough. Chandler is a former Bellator champion, but here's the reality. Chandler is 2-4 in his last 6 fights. He's not a top contender anymore. He's a gatekeeper with name recognition. That's Paddy's resume. 4 wins, 0 top 5 opponents, 0 elite grapplers, 0 championship level competition, and somehow he's 1 win away from lightweight title shot. Now let's compare that to Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje beat Michael Chandler as well. He beat Rafael Fiziev, beat Dustin Poirier. These are legitimate top 10 wins, okay? Gaethje at least has some resume to justify being a title eliminator. But here's the problem. Gaethje versus Paddy isn't the fight that should be happening, because there's a guy who's beating better competition than both of them. A guy who's been more active than both of them. A guy who's literally said he's ready to fight in January after putting on an impressive performance. Alright? And his name is Arman Tsarukyan.
Tsarukyan responded shortly after the announcement, expressing clear confusion over the decision. Posting his first reaction on X, he wrote, "Make it make sense." The MMA community quickly followed with a wave of reactions, many echoing Arman's frustration. One fan wrote, "Dana really did Arman dirty again. The guy has fought every monster in the division, proved he's the real #1 contender, and still gets skipped so Paddy can get another hype boost. Merit doesn't matter anymore." Paddy Pimblett getting an interim title shot is hilarious. In a few weeks, Paddy or Gaethje might have a belt wrapped around their waist when there is a clear-cut #1 contender, UFC or WWE. Another wrote, "Dana and team came together and said, let's just piss everyone off." Paddy doesn't deserve to be anywhere near the title right now, especially after Arman cemented himself as the #1 contender. It should be Arman versus Justin whilst Ilya recovers from his heartbreak. By the way, I don't want to hear anyone criticize Hamzat now. He's legit injured, unlike Ilya. Should have been Holloway over both, LMAO. Another tweeted, "Disgrace, just created the interim so Justin gets what he wants, and if Paddy wins, more hype for a matchup with Ilya. Interim lightweight without the #1 contender? Is this UFC or WWE?"
And the UFC just erased him from the title picture. Here's where the rigging becomes undeniable. Arman Tsarukyan is literally the #1 contender, coming off a finish from Dan Hooker. Not by popularity, not by hype, by actual wins. Just when you think it can't get any more blatant, the UFC announces UFC 325, Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez again. Nobody asked for this fight that makes 0 sense. Even Volkanovski himself was confused about this.
A bit in it, bit of work involved. Obviously, we all know that I wanted to fight earlier. I wanted, I thought it was going to be December. We thought, Lerone Murphy, December. I guess UFC and they were waiting for John Silva and Lopez. Then they were saying Lopez, and we're like, obviously we're like, we just fought that guy. Is there more deserving people, whatnot? Whatever, everyone knows that I'll fight anyone, right? So whoever they put in front of me, I'll do. But then it was looking like it wasn't going to happen. But then it did happen, which was great. Again, I thought, it was a Mobzar deserving, Leroy Murphy. I thought they were the two guys. They're the guys I called out. UFC really won Lopez. At least everyone knows they're in for a treat. With your Mobzars and Lerones, they're probably, they're more deserving. But are they going to bring a fight like Lopez would? I think the fans are going to appreciate the fight that me and Lopez are going to have.
Let's break it down. Diego Lopez fought Volk 10 months ago at UFC 306. He lost, and it was kind of one-sided. Good scrap, but one-sided. It was a good fight, but he lost. Since then, his only win is against the 11th-ranked John Silva. Not saying John Silva is an easy person to beat. That was a tough win, a good win, but still, he's number 11. Meanwhile, let's talk about who actually earned the shot. Movsar Evloev. Movsar beat Diego Lopez. Movsar beat Arnold Allen. Movsar beat Aljamain Sterling. Movsar has beaten everyone they've put in front of him. He's been undefeated for over a decade. He's 8-0 in the UFC. He's the clear #1 contender at featherweight. What did he do wrong? Not sell enough pay-per-views, not have enough Instagram followers, not talk enough trash. Because based on wins, based on actual sports, Movsar should be fighting Volk, not Diego. But even if they didn't want Movsar, they could have gone with Leroy Murphy. Both these guys have better resumes than Diego Lopez. Leroy Murphy stepped in last minute to replace Movsar Evloev and knocked out Aaron Pico. The type of things that the UFC says they love. Someone who's active, someone who steps in and is a company man and has a finish. But that wasn't enough. It just wasn't.
Missing the opportunity to fight one of the featherweight GOATs is what hurts me the most. It's not about who's the best anymore. It's about who's most popular. It is what it is. Business is never personal. We dust off and move forward. Later he added, March UK against anyone. Another top contender, Movsar Evloev, also weighed in, offering to settle things directly with a showdown for the #1 contender spot. He wrote, Leon Murphy, I will give you the opportunity to fight the #1 contender. Tell your people you're ready to fight me on the same card as the championship.
Both these guys have better resumes than Diego right now, but instead the UFC went with the popular, exciting, highlight-friendly fighter because it looks good, and that's exactly the kind of matchmaking the UFC used to mock boxing for. Now, this is where we need to talk about the WWE comparison, because I know some of you are gonna say, come on man, the UFC isn't scripted. The fights are real. You're right, the fights are real. The outcomes aren't predetermined. The blood is real, the knockouts are real, but the matchmaking is starting to look a lot like WWE booking. The WWE, the promoter, chooses the stars. He chooses the champions. He creates drama. He creates emotional storylines. The best don't rise to the top. Your character and marketability does. Now, wins and losses matter in WWE, but only when it's convenient for the storyline. If they want to push someone, they'll give them wins. If they want to bury someone, they'll give them losses. The rankings doesn't matter. The sport doesn't matter. The entertainment does. But UFC is no longer matchmaking fighters based on who earned the shot. You're matchmaking fighters based on popularity, storylines, marketability, a fighter's look, a fighter's country, or whatever helps sell the next event on Paramount Plus. That's not a sport. That's sports entertainment. Let me be clear, the UFC is still the best combat sports product on earth in my opinion. The athletes are incredible, the fights are real, the moments are legendary, nobody's denying that. But this new matchmaking trend, this habit of skipping contenders, ignoring rankings and prioritizing popularity over merit, it's dangerous, because once the fans start believing the matchmaking isn't fair, once fighters realize wins don't matter as much as marketability, once the system breaks down to the point where everyone knows it's rigged but nobody cares anymore, you lose everything that made the UFC special. The UFC became the biggest MMA promotion in the world because they promised something boxing couldn't deliver: the best fighting the best. No politics, no ducking, no cherry picking, just rankings, merits, and competition. That was the deal. That was the brand. But UFC 324 and UFC 325 proved that deal is breaking down. Not the fights, the matchmaking. And unless something changes, this is only gonna get worse. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let me know what you think about all this. Am I crazy, or is the UFC really turning into the WWE? And more importantly, do you even care anymore, or are you just here for the violence? I'll see you in the next one.